Okay, kids, you know what time it is. Does anybody really know what time it is? Okay, it is time to read a book because you gotta wake up to the truth. The Wuhan Coverup. I know it's backwards on The Terrifying Bioweapons Arm Race by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., best-selling author and future president. If they don't kill him like they did his uncle and dad. Okay, in a striking coincidence, those hearings began only 6 days before the 9/11 attack and only 15 days before news desks at CBS, NBC, ABC, and the New York Post and the National Enquirer, which are all basically talking head puppets for the corporate oligarchy, began receiving envelopes containing a fine white powder of highly weaponized anthrax spores. Where did it come from? Fort Detrick. It was a U.S. operation against the people of the United States. Even to the media that kowtows for them. Okay. Beginning on September 18th, even as Senator Biden conducted his hearings with the nation on high alert from the World Trade Center attacks. Inside job. Someone began mailing weapons-grade anthrax to those U.S. media companies. The anthrax attacks did not make the press until staffers in the congressional office of Senator Patrick Leahy opened similar powder-filled envelopes postmarked October 9th. Oh, they sent them out 2 days before September 11th. And guess when the first Wuhan victim of the military attack on the world in Wuhan showed up at the hospital? September 12th. Oh, that's because on September 11th they released it, like they always do. So they mailed out these deadly things from Fort Detrick 2 days before they blew up the four towers on 9/11. That's including Tower 7 and 6 that didn't have any planes hitting them. Okay, followed by those addressed to Senator Tom Daschle, postmarked October 15th. So they sent them out the 9th and the 15th, and probably other dates around September 11th. Those mailings constituted the deadliest bioterrorist attack against our country in its 230-year history. 22 people became infected and 5 died. Millions of Americans suffered anthrax anxiety, and hundreds of thousands of quote-unquote worried well flooded the nation's healthcare system. More than 50,000 took broad-spectrum antibiotics. Many others purchased antibiotics for future prophylactic. That's cleaning before you get bioweaponed. Prophylactic, which they tried to block during the COVID coup. All the things that would have saved you from getting COVID, like blowing a hot air up your nose, hot steam up your nose with the blow dryer. That's what I put up on way before even the shutdowns on the COVID coup. That's when I knew that was all an inside job. When probably in January of 2020, I got a video from a doctor in Asia, I think it was in Singapore, who said, "Oh yeah, doing the first so-called pandemic of early 2000s, they would steam boiling water and shoot the boiling water vapor up their nose with a blow dryer." And I put that on YouTube, on Facebook, and both of them got taken down for quote-unquote medical misinformation. That's when I knew, okay, this is a COVID coup. We haven't even had a shutdown. We don't know what was released from Wuhan yet, but they're already censoring us on the internet if we dare to speak against their bullshit lies. The anthrax attacks became public as yet another Senate committee, the Senate Appropriations Committee, convened separate secret hearings on bioterrorism. Senator Robert Byrd, B-Y-R-D, chaired those hearings between October 3rd and November 29th, 2001. If someone had planned a propaganda campaign to frighten the public about bioterrorism in order to push through passage of malevolent and self-serving legislation, quote unquote, the Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriot act in the world, in a period of orchestrated hysteria, they couldn't have executed it more brilliantly. Okay. The witnesses at the Byrd hearing included many of the same medical, military, industrial complex mandarins who, 22 years later, would make their triumphant push for the biosecurity agenda during the COVID-19 crisis. Among those luminaries was Bob Kramer of the Alhebres company Bioport. Other witnesses included executives from the nation's leading vaccine developers, including Wyeth, W-Y-E-T-H Pharmaceuticals, now Pfizer, emissaries from Pharma Trade Association groups, NIAID, National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, which is what that they do now. They promote diseases and infections and allergies. The more they do, the more people get allergies and the more they get infections. Director Anthony Fauci, Mr. Tony Science, and biowarfare expert James LeDuc. Last name is 2 words, L-E space D-U-C, LeDuc, James LeDuc. Both of whom would disgrace themselves in 2020 by colluding with Chinese scientists affiliated with the People's Liberation Army to conceal critical information about COVID's origin from the U.S. Congress. They should be in jail for lying to Congress. The Second Gulf War, Dark Winter, and the subsequent House and Senate hearings laid the foundation for the CIA and its neocon allies to falsely blame the anthrax attacks on Saddam Hussein and to use those attacks as the justification for waging the Iraq invasion. PNAC's founder, Robert Kagan, what's it, PNAC? Project for the New American Century. Robert Kagan stoked the hysteria by co-authoring an entirely fabricated article in the Weekly Standard. Oh, we know fabricated articles like Tony Fauci promoted in Nature magazine. So the fabricated article in the Weekly Standard with Bill Kristol falsely claiming that Saddam was hosting non-Iraqi Islamic terrorists at the training camp in Iraq, which is a bullshit lie, complete with a Boeing 707 for practicing hijacking. Yeah, right. Kagan's wife, Victoria Nuland, would emerge in 2022 as chief architect of the Ukrainian war. Oh, quinky-dink theory I do. President Bush later said his worst mistake as president was believing CIA Director George Tenet's assurance that Saddam's possession of weapons of mass destruction was, quote, a slam dunk. There was no evidence whatsoever. Any evidence was that we gave him all the biological warfare technology when he was our main asset in the CIA. Years later, the New York Times made an unprecedented apology for the critical role its jingoistic, stunningly deceptive, and irresponsible reporting played during the Gulf War's rollout. The author of this yellow journalism was the Times warmongering star reporter Judith Miller. Schedule your muscle tough. Shut up. Hold on, I gotta check if I have a call here. I better get off my chingator way I say. Be quiet. Okay, got my volume up. I got my Sprite, I got my Orange Crush. As I show in The Real Anthony Fauci, Miller had deep ties to the CIA and the neocons, and later went to jail for her part in the legal caper to out a deep state CIA spy, Valerie Plame, as part of the neocon scheme to intimidate and punish Plame's husband, diplomat Joe Wilson, who had publicly questioned the CIA's key intelligence assessments that Saddam was purchasing uranium yellow cake from Niger for processing into a dirty bomb. White House neocons led by Vice President Dick Cheney had offered this fake intelligence as a principal justification for the U.S. to invade Iraq, a nation that had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks and was not providing refuge or support for Islamic terrorists. So we just destroyed. That was the greatest act of terrorism in the whole world history, was the carpet bombing of the civilian infrastructure of the entire Iraq nation, called shock and awe bombing. The greatest act of terrorism, almost as bad, or a little worse than what the U.S. is doing. Or, well, I say U.S., it's the Israeli government, which is the same as the U.S. government. They're all the same deep state actors in Palestine right now. The U.S. was just 7 times more deadly, way more bombs than ever used in history on a civilian population. All based on lies to steal their national resources and destroy their nation. Cheney Chief of Staff Scooter Germboy Libby, a neocon messiah, also went to prison for his role as the plot's mastermind. Oh, I didn't know Scooter Libby went to jail for that. Good. We needed someone to go to jail. We should put Dick Cheney and Bush and Rumsfeld and all the other criminals in jail too. Osama bin Laden, the author of the World Trade Center attacks, supposedly, which he had really nothing to do with, he supposedly directed that operation from an Afghan cave. Yeah, right. But Donald Rumsfeld complained, quote, "There aren't any good targets in Afghanistan," end quote. The PNAC, Project for New American Century, chicken hawks, were determined to use 9/11 as a pretext for a war against Iraq. Anthrax provided that provocation. U.S. control of Iraq's oil resources was, for PNAC, a key stepping stone for the coming century of American imperialism, and a bioweapon attack against America became the ideal provocation for preemptive invasion. The Patriot Act, which should be the biggest lie the government ever told. There's nothing patriotic about the Patriot Act, is the next section, which I might read right now. Let's see. I think my head's getting cold. I'm going to put my little beanie cap on. Okay. The chemtrailers only came out this morning, and their chemtrails are still up there, but not many. Dark Winter also set the stage for the blitzkrieg passage of the 342-page quote-unquote Patriot Act. Quote, "Somehow that bill was written and waiting for its crisis," end quote, said Francis Boyle. The neocons took it off the shelf the day after September 11th and rammed it to passage in both houses in just 45 days. Dennis Kucinich, who served in Congress at the time, told me. Dennis Kucinich is running for Congress independently now. I wish I lived in his state so I can vote for him. He was the only person other than Bernie Sanders that I would have voted for in the Democratic Party. But now he's independent. Luckily, he was the campaign manager for the next president, RFK Jr., but he decided to run for Congress, so someone else is taking over his helm. Okay, here's what Dennis Kucinich said, greatest congressman from the East Coast I know. They broke congressional protocol by not providing congressional officers with copies of the bill. Oh, we're going to pass this 342-page bill, but you can't read it. You just got to believe what we say. It's good in it, which took away all our constitutional rights and destroyed habeas corpus and a bunch of other things, and allowed extraordinary rendition, which is putting people in prison without notifying anyone. The only version supplied was at the clerk's office. In the bill form, it was double-spaced, so it was around 700 pages. I speed read it. I can guarantee you that I was the only member of Congress to read it. Michael Moore read it when he used to do journalism in an ice cream truck outside the congressional office. I realized it was not the same bill we debated in committee. They had switched it out after the debate. It was all sleight of hand. I recognized at once that the act was an all-out attack on our Constitution. It dismantled America's most important values and opened the door for a surveillance state. It gave all these terrible new powers to the FBI and intelligence agencies to spy on Americans and ignore the Bill of Rights. I tried to raise the alarm. No one wanted to hear about it. They had been intellectually and ethically disabled by 9/11, just like they were by the COVID coup. Everyone wanted to be on record having done something patriotic, which calling it the Patriotic Act was the biggest lie you can do. So they all just decided to believe that the quote-unquote Patriot Act was what it pretended to be, which was a bullshit lie. The total cost of America's bobbled response to 9/11 and the anthrax attacks was $8 trillion, including $2.3 trillion for the Afghanistan-Pakistan war and $4.1 trillion to erect a surveillance infrastructure for America's national security state. According to a Brown University study, some 800,000 humans died in those conflicts and the subsequent wars in Syria and Yemen, which flowed directly from America's anthrax 9/11 response. Some 2 million Iraqis and Syrian refugees flooded northward, leading to Brexit, the rise of right-wing nationalism, and the destabilization of democracy across Europe. In short, the anthrax attack engineered an unprecedented shift of national wealth to the priorities of the CIA and its allies in the military-industrial complex that was unrivaled in its monetary costs and in its domination of democracy until the COVID pandemic of 2020. Where am I? Okay. I lost my place. Oh, here I am. In yet another uncanny coincidence, the primary targets of the anthrax attacks were the two liberal senators, Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy, who were leading the Senate fight to derail the speedy passage of the Patriot Act. In addition, on June 21st, 2001, Senate Majority Leader Daschle had co-written a letter with House Minority Leader Dick Gebhardt to Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld expressing their concern about the continued use of anthrax vaccine in the military. Quote, in light of the questions surrounding the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine and the inability of the vaccine manufacturers to obtain FDA approval, many had asked why the Pentagon had not halted the vaccination program for all military personnel until these outstanding questions are satisfactorily addressed. Colonel Thomas Buzz Remsfer, Remphfer, one of the most stalwart activists fighting the military anthrax vaccine mandate, was actually on the phone with Daschle's office when the anthrax letter delivery occurred. The anthrax attack effectively ended Daschle's opposition to the anthrax vaccine, as post-attack fears reinvigorated the dying vaccine program. After Daschle's office opened an anthrax-containing letter on October 15th, U.S. Capitol Police closed the Capitol for a week. The House passed the Patriot Act on October 11th. Oh, that is disgusting. Exactly a month from the date of the inside job of 9/11. The Senate on October 24th passed it. Bush signed the bill on October 26th. The anthrax attacks conveniently shut Congress down during the critical period in American history when our legislators should have been carefully debating both the Iraq invasion and the Patriot Act. The act, therefore, passed with almost no congressional input. The act plowed under constitutional privacy and due process rights and ushered in unprecedented powers for federal police and spy agencies to surveil every communication among Americans and to detain U.S. citizens without due process, things that had been previously illegal. One of the act's many shocking provisions ended both the constitutional prohibition against warrantless searches and the statutory ban for forbidding the CIA from spying. Forbidding. Let me say that again. One of the act's many shocking provisions ended both the constitutional prohibition against warrantless searches and the statutory ban forbidding the CIA from spying on Americans. So the CIA is allowed to spy on people outside of the country, but they're not allowed to spy on Americans and American soil. And they're really not supposed to spy on Americans outside of America, but they do. And the Patriot Act totally destroyed that constitutional prohibition. The Patriot Act altered and expanded the definition of terrorism to include any support, financial or otherwise, of groups deemed, quote, terrorists, which anyone can be called a terrorist. There's no definition that is sticking under the expanded definitions. It's important to note here that during the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for a time expanded the definition of terrorism to include vaccine hesitancy. Oh yeah, people that don't want to be taking deadly vaccines are now called terrorists. What a great build-up 20 years before the COVID coup. To include vaccine hesitancy, which included opposition to vaccine mandates and criticism of other government policies on vaccination. In other words, I and millions of other law-abiding and patriotic Americans suddenly become quote-unquote terrorists, subject to the panoply of constitutional abuses provided for in the quote-unquote Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriotic act in the world. Scraping the Geneva Protocol and the Bioweapons Convention. That's the next section. I'll read that in the coming days. But please share this video. Please support my what do you call it? My crusade to get the word out about these bullshit lies of the government, starting with September 11th. Actually, starting with the way before September 11th, but September 11th was the biggest obvious ploy of the American government to destroy the Constitution. This is one of the great books I'm reading. in full on my Facebook and slowly uploading to my Rumble channel. I almost upload nothing anymore to YouTube because YouTube has become the censorship industrial complex. Even before the COVID coup, they started taking down all my natural healing videos and saying my music videos promote violence when they're peace activist songs, which is complete antithesis of what they are. Well, that's when I knew the COVID coup was underway before even the lockdowns. All right, kids, I love you all. Please help me promote these videos. Please subscribe to my Rumble channel. That's the only place I put up videos that are not censored. Rumble. It was like what YouTube was before it got fully co-opted by the CIA. All right, peace out. Love you all.